So how would you describe your position at 38 Studios?
Well, my first title officially, it was even on my cards, was Creator of Worlds. But then someone realized...
Sounds kind of epic.
Well, actually, if you do the letters out, it's cow. So, but basically my job was to come in and help them build a world and a story for this massive IP. You know, make the world make sense, big history for it, and all of that. So I'm basically the world builder. I met with Kurt and his group, and they had some ideas, just general ideas that they wanted to do in this game. And when they were telling me them, I just started putting a world around it that I thought would make sense. And I had a couple of ideas, and we ran with them. And I hired a team together of my friends and guys I'd worked with for years and played with for years. And we did all the research and just built it out, then presented it back to them. And then, of course, Kurt hired his guys in, and what it really came down to was everybody buying into the central premise and storyline of the world. And then my job quickly went from being the guy creating the world to the guy, you know, telling the other people who were creating the world, the pieces of the world, whether or not it fit. And then my job shifted from there to just kind of going, awesome, defend that to me. Because as they bought more and more into the overall project, you know what I mean?
How different is it to work on a game world like this, and for instance a fantasy world that's in novels and things like that?
Well, the world itself isn't all that different. I mean, the process of making the world, the consistency of the world, the suspension of disbelief you're going for, trying to get people immersed in the world, that's not different. The biggest difference is when you're writing a novel, you've got all these characters that you've created, and I'm inviting you to live vicariously through my characters. So you're going down the road with Dritz de Warden and his friends, and they're going to go on an adventure, and you get to enjoy that adventure through their eyes. But in a game, the most important character in the game for anybody is the character he or she creates. And you always have to keep that in mind. So when you're building the world, you want to give them the opportunities to succeed, to be the hero, or to fail. The one that best exemplifies a world, a living, breathing world for me is still EverQuest 1. When I first started playing EverQuest 1, I walked in and I realized I could write 1,000 books here. Because it was so alive. And you always got the feeling when you were leaving something in EQ that it was still going on behind you. So I think that's the best example of a game world.
So how would you describe the world that you've created? Could you tell us anything about it?
No, I really can't tell you much, unfortunately. I can tell you that it's the whole point of what we were doing when we were creating the world was to make it believable, to make it make sense to the player. So when you see the various races and their interactions, and there's a long history that led to that makes sense. Now, you won't see all of that history in any one product, obviously, but there's a reason why X and Y hate each other. It goes back and it filters out throughout the communities, or there's a reason why X will trade with Y but not with Z. All of it makes sense because we know the history. But as far as the particulars of the world itself, we're just not going there yet.
So this week it was announced that Project Mercury is going to be published by EA. Can you tell us what your involvement with that is?
My biggest involvement actually goes right back to when I started with 38 Studios, which was actually Green Monster Games back then, in creating the world. Because when we created the world, we've got 10,000 years of history. It all makes sense. We know where everybody is. We know why they're there. And so when the guys from BHG came on board and joined, the companies merged and became this one entity, essentially, they had so much to look at and see that their creative team, Ken Ralston and Mark Nelson, their writers, could look at the history, they could look at the races, they could look at all of that, and they could come up with a story that they thought would fit. And because it was so rich, and there was so much there, they already knew the parameters of the world. So by the time I got involved in the specifics with their game, it was really just going down and giving them my feelings of different things they were doing in their story, and then reviewing their story and making sure it made sense and fit for the bigger purposes of the IP, which it did. It was an amazing job, and Steve Denuser worked with them quite closely from 38 on that. And then my involvement is now when they're telling me the things they're doing, I say, oh, this race, I always felt this, this, and this, or or whatever, and then they'll draw from that. So it's more, at this point, and even with 38 Studios now, not just with BHG, I'm more at the 10,000 foot level. So people bounce ideas off me to get my reactions to them. But if I disagree with something, whether it's 38 Studios and now BHG, the person that I'm disagreeing with, the person who I'm disagreeing with, will be able to defend their idea because they know the world. They've bought into the world. So it's really fun for me. I mean, at this point, it's great for me because when we first started, we'd have these content meetings, and the content team would come in and they'd say, we're going to do this, this, and this. And I'd say, wait a minute. And I'd take out that original book that we built, the original Bible of the world, and I'd say, you guys are moving away from this. You guys are moving. Stay on track. Focus. This is what the world smells like. This is what the world looks like. This is what the world feels like. Don't move from that. And then quickly that began to morph into them coming in and saying, oh, this is what we're going to do, and me saying, wow, that's great. And so it's been an incredible experience for me as an editor at this point.
So how would you say that the two games relate? Is one sort of a build-up to the other, or are they completely separate entities and they're just smaller touching where they touch?
Both. Everything we do, we want to be complete in and of itself, a complete and enjoyable experience in and of itself, and we want it to be related to all the other things that are going on.